Kindiki. Now, in the studio with me, I have George Ngaire. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Fred, for having me.
Now, George, it's amazing. I remember almost 2 years ago.
Yes.
2 years ago, we sat on a show.
Yes.
In a different setup.
Yeah.
2 years, I guess, and a couple of months.
Yes.
We sat on a show on a different setup, and you said, and that's the day when the president was sworn in, or was it the day that they won the election?
The day they won the election.
The day they won the election.
Absolutely.
We sat in a setup, and the first thing you told me was that these two are not going to last together for long. We thought it was going to happen in the second term.
Yes.
It's happened only 2 years after they were sworn in.
I think it's interesting that it came way too earlier than we had predicted.
Yes.
But Fred, looking at the kind of personalities that we were dealing with, President William Ruto, and the history that we have of him as a politician over the years, and how he's been able to maneuver all his way up to what he's become today, a president of the Republic of Kenya. And also looking at the history of the deputy president, having been a one-time member of parliament, he's a first-time member of parliament, and to be able to rise to such a position as well, it means it gives you a hint of how shrewd he is to be able to maneuver through characters that have been in politics for 20, 30 years, whom you would have said by virtue of their stature, they probably would have been the rightful people to be maybe the deputy presidents and things like that. And I told you that these are two very strong personalities. None of them is a disciple of the other. It's just a relationship of convenience because they have a goal to win an election. But now that they've won an election, because that's what I was telling you, now that they've won an election, what they wanted to achieve has already been achieved, Fred. And so now, depending with how they're going to balance their interests going forward, because politics is about interest, it was going to determine how long this relationship is going to be. And lo and behold, it didn't take long before we began
it's a honeymoon that ended pretty fast.
It did.
They didn't even come back home.
It did
for the honeymoon.
Absolutely, there were already arguments at the honeymoon, and of course, President William Ruto, being who he is, maybe he wasn't patient enough to be able to tolerate his deputy president the way his former boss tolerated him. You know, President Uhuru Kenyatta would have very much impeached Deputy President William Ruto. Remember, the Azimio coalition at that particular time in Parliament and the Senate, they had the majority of the numbers. They could have very much impeached him even in the Senate. That's why governors like Sonko would have never left if at all deputy president had the numbers in the Senate. And the Senate is the ultimate decider of whether you go home or not. But I think President Uhuru Kenyatta probably had a much high tolerance level, and was able to tolerate this deputy president in as much as he went around the country for almost 2-3 years, friend. You know, going against him and all the projects that he was doing. Some of the things that Deputy President Kithure has been accused of sabotaging government. I mean, being that he's a state officer and is the one that is outside there questioning the conduct of government, is pretty much what this president was perfected by the president. Absolutely, and he rubbished him. In fact, he said that all the entire manifesto that they had for Jubilee in the re-election campaign had already been distorted by the things that the president was engaged in at that particular time, and it was open and clear. But President Uhuru Kenyatta, probably a very tolerant guy, gave him chance. He kept even his cabinet ministers to the very last day, you know, even those that you'd consider insiders like Charles Kithure, you know, that is literally Ruto's right-hand man. He was in cabinet up to the very last day when he resigned to go and run for governor. Chelugui sat in cabinet. Chelugui sat through. You can tell the different personalities of these presidents. And so I knew that at some point in time, if they do not manage their ambitions, being that Deputy President Kithure himself, being that is a self-made kind of an individual, owing to also what he's been able to create over time, he was not going to be a pushover, Fred. I told you the story, the case that he had of his money, about 200 million being freezed, is averagely what an MP earns in 25 years. You know, if you're a member of parliament and you're earning a basic salary of 700,000.
Yeah, he had
in a year, in 60 months, it's just about 40 or 50 million. So 40 million or so. So for you to be able to have 200 million, it means you have to serve 5 terms to be able to earn that money. So clearly that is not a beggar. And he's not the kind of person.
And he was still able to operate with 200 million. Locked.
Yeah, and he was still able to support the campaign. He was one of the main financiers of that campaign. Many of the other characters, including the person that is being sworn today, Mheshimiwa Kithure, couldn't raise even a tenth of what we are talking about because it's a lot of money. And so for such a person, there's no way, Fred, you're going to baby him around or push him around. And he's repeated it even in the other day in his statement. He said the reason why they're pushing him aside is because he's been able to tell the president the truth.
Yes.
And maybe his president doesn't like to hear that.
but did it go wrong or did it start wrong? Because when you look at Rigathi Gachagua, number one, he was not the first choice of you know, I think these were members from Central Kenya.
Yes.
He was not their first choice. Kindiki was. Yeah. And then during the swearing in ceremony, again, there were a lot of guffaws with him. So did it go wrong or it started wrong?
Fred, it didn't start wrong because originally they knew what they were going for and they were actually able to achieve. So what they had planned and set out to achieve, Fred, they did achieve. One of them became president and the other one became deputy president. I think it went wrong after they got in because now interests were at stake and there were many people that now had to be taken care of and many interests for that matter that were be able to be taken care of. I was listening to some of the insiders of Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, is that he understood that being that he came from the mountain and the mountain did contribute a very big chunk of the votes that got this president elected. Actually, without the mountain, there would be no President William Ruto. And so he felt like the level, you know, and as far as entitlement is concerned, that they have a huge stake in this government. That's why there are some decisions that are said actually orders were coming from the deputy president directly to state officers that the president didn't like, which ideally is what this president
he was giving out orders.
He was exercising authority.
The president, he was exercising the presidential powers without being...
Yeah, it's a political mandate by virtue of the number of votes they, you know, what they would consider stake into the government.
That's a big mistake.
It's what you call insubordination in many ways. And most people do not take it lightly. Maybe the only person that could take it lightly was President Uhuru Kenyatta, because this president was conducting himself in similar manner. You remember the wild allegations of this president being the kind of person that actually calls himself to state officers when he was deputy president and was being accused of insubordinating the former president. But you see, thankfully for him, President Uhuru Kenyatta was tolerant, but himself, he is not tolerant to that. And so it went wrong after they got into office, and obviously Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua being having a lower hand, had to become a victim of that outcome.
It's unfortunate for him. He goes down in history as the first deputy president to be impeached.
A precedent in many ways, and I think that's why I said earlier on off air that today is a turning point in as far as the politics of our country is concerned, because even those future presidents who want to come in, we might want to look at how we contain the roles of those who are our assistants, being that him as a president, you must have a deputy president, and even the governorship, you know, the challenges we've had with deputy governors, because you then have deputy governors that come in that sometimes, Fred, it could be maybe not that I want you to fail, but maybe I'm just a stronger personality than you, and then you realize this guy maybe might want to topple me. So we might need to get to a level where we're able to actually even just do a simple legislation on the Deputy Governors Act to sort of have clear mandate on who and what a deputy governor is supposed to be and what are the specific roles, so that you can be able to ensure that there's seamless operations of county government, national government. Fred, every time we have such political fallouts, the victims have always been the people. Because then we spend a lot of time politicking and doing other things, and we forget the basic things that Kenyans are currently dealing with, the shisha, sheaf, and all these kind of things that we are battling from food, hunger, health, and many other issues that are fairly much more important. And you remember, I think this was well captured when we had the public participation for this impeachment, where Kenyans, you know, when you call a public participation, the law says that you specify the specific matter that Kenyans are supposed to come and contribute.
Yes.
But then you saw what happened. Kenyans came there and now are basically winding up their own things. They are very angry people.
Yes.
And even as we look at what is happening today, Fred, is that I even hinted to you of, I was saying that the politicians might be able to, might be achieving their goals, which is to be able to swear in Kindiki and move on with the business of doing their politics and the government of the day. Yeah. But where do the Kenyans fall? And what is their opinion?
Kenyans basically are the ones who make the call.
Absolutely. And Fred, if ever there was doubt that Kenyans ever said, then this president would never have become president. Had it been somebody else decided to become president, then there would be no President William Ruto, because there's no president in Africa and in this world who really wants to lose an election. I don't think President Biden would have wanted it, never, or rather President Trump would have wanted to lose an election. Yes. But you lose for various reasons. And I think this president has fairly grossly miscalculated, because all through the many political blunders he's committed, Fred, he has evaded the public. Yes. He hasn't faced the public at any point. He is now dealing with basically the privileges that come with the office. But a day and time when it would come and you'd want to face the public, unfortunately, this is the public that was not, this is the kind of public that we have today. It's not the kind of public that we had in the 80s and the 90s that was more reserved, had no access to information.
Oh, these ones
are on the
completely
streets.
Different.
They are very informed.
Yes.
You understand?
And he will, if we go for a by-election,
I'm telling you,
I believe he's going to be whipped thoroughly.
People will not be, I think, we might even end up having very nice candidates. Sometimes Fred, in races, you have a very good candidate
who loses
because of who he has come with. Yes. You know, it happens a lot, particularly in the strongholds of the main candidates. That's why in the mountain, it would be a hard sell to get even a best performing professor to become an MP. True. Never mind, he's a qualified guy with good papers because of the nature of our politics. And so I can imagine being a UDA candidate in those by-elections.
Oh, that's going to be
which is completely
painful.
Unavoidable. We have a by-election in Kirinyaga. Unfortunately, an MCA passed on there. Yeah. I think the same happened in Nyandarua as well. So, and maybe like Kipia and 2 other counties in the mountain. Of the 10 by-elections, MCA by-elections that we have, then you have 3 very important by-elections which are actually in opposition stronghold, which currently is in government, which is the ODM seat in Magarini, which now I think was nullified by the Supreme Court, so there'll be a by-election there. It's an ODM stronghold. And of course, Opiah Wandayi seat in Siaya as well. And then there's an MP, the one who got an accident, was knocked by the MP for Banisa in Mandera East. He died here in South B, I think. Unfortunately, was knocked by, I think, a motorbike or something like that. And so he passed on. So, which again was also an opposition seat. You know, that constituency voted, that county actually voted Azimio via the Captain Robert, the former governor, had a party which was an Azimio affiliated party that won the seats in that area. So it will be a perfect point to be able to tell what the positions of the people are, including the ODM supporters, whether or not they agree with the current developments in the party. I think that decision will be done on the ballot in those by-elections. And it will be the first test of what the people think of the kind of things that are happening, like what is happening today. You know,
before we get to the precedents that were set yesterday in court, for a government that came into power with very strong language about abducting people and that kind of things, with the president holding a press conference and condemning the police, even firing the IG for what he claimed was, you know, abduction and murders of people, to a point where right now envoys from the US and the UK are telling the government, you cannot have this, you cannot have the kind of abductions that are happening, and it's abduction and murders, and all of them being pointed to the police. For a government that came on the campaign promise that this will never happen on my watch, to have this happening, it's very unfortunate.
It's very unfortunate, and even more sad is that an official statement from the Inspector General of Police, and I think they had a joint press conference with the CID, the Director of Criminal Investigation, who actually confirmed that in the last 3 months we've had 19 abductions and killings of women. 97 abductions.
No, yeah, 97.
It's unbelievable that can happen in this country, and the police service continue to operate the way it is. Fred, these are the consequences of the people. Sometimes you blame the people, we blame the leaders, but these are the consequences of the choices we make as citizens. You know, we fail to understand what I keep saying is the opportunity cost of why you go to an election and why you choose a leader, and why it's important to be able to profile a leader and understand his history and who he is, to be able to determine what kind of leadership you'd expect. And so the leaders are a byproduct of what the people have decided. And we had a government we have a government that campaigned on the principle of the hustler nation, of reforms, and be able to cut down government wastage. You remember that time they were saying a lot of wastage that was there, and stealing of public funds with the KEPSA, the medical cancer scandals that were there. And they were saying that we want to come in and be different, you know, be able to run government differently. Now we are back to the days when, even when you look at the conduct of institutions that are supposed to be independent, someone would question how the swearing committee yesterday was immediately, how it was even able to predict that there was going to be such a decision in court.
The speed and efficiency.
It's unbelievable.
That these things are being done.
It's unbelievable because you might think, for those who are supporters of this government and are in support of what is happening, which is their political right, might be enjoying. But for those who believe in the importance of strong institutions, Fred, there's nothing to smile about what happened in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Because today, it might be, and I think the best person to explain this must be C.S. Murkomen. Remember the kind of sentiments he used to say in the previous government, until when they had a fallout with President Uhuru Kenyatta. And all of them were thrown out of their positions. And every time Kenyans and the media would run clips of him being extremely arrogant. And he even at one point said, got tired of being reminded. He said, I accept I behaved badly, and it's a lesson for me. And so for a president who came in from being that he had been mistreated a lot, to be able to run a government that is facing kind of allegations that we have, it's a tragedy for our country.
Now, the precedents that were set, that have been set so far, I mean, it was very clear that Parliament was compromised by the executive.
Absolutely.
You can clearly say that. The National Assembly was compromised by the executive. The Senate, where majority of people had hoped that maybe, same thing. And I dare say, the judiciary, the three arms of government have colluded to teach Gachagua a lesson. But unfortunately, we will pay for that lesson.
Absolutely, and I'm happy you're looking at it from that angle, because I've said many times, personally, I've never been a fan of Gachagua as a person. But you see, as a human being, as a Kenyan, he still is a Kenyan that is well governed within the Kenyan constitution. And when you look at institutions behaving in a manner like this, any person that is planning to be in this country many years to come should be concerned at how the conduct of public servant is today. Because today the victim might be a Deputy President Gachagua, but tomorrow Friday might be a Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya. I would want to have a fair process in the event that I have a fallout with my boss, and things that come out like this. It's amazing that for me and the people that are actually as Kenyans who are just observing the conduct of the public service, I'm of concern as to how civil servants now can blatantly conduct themselves in such a manner, knowing that there's somebody guaranteeing their security. Because the manner in which Parliament behaved, never in the history of this country have we ever had such an attendance where there's a turnout of 291 people to pass a decision in Parliament. Not even when we're dealing with taxes and very important bills that in Parliament that are supposed to actually concern Kenyans more, that they would need attendance to that level. It has never happened, Fred. For you to be able to achieve such a mobilization,
291,
it's unbelievable. And I was telling somebody that Mwengi Mutuse has no capacity to even assemble 100, knowing of how how pricey it is to mobilize an MP
Yes.
to come to parliament, how pricey it is to mobilize an MP to come to parliament and to be able to execute, in fact, such an important matter, 291.
Yes.
That can only be done from a higher level, and it then becomes the tragedy of our times, because then the principle of separation of powers and how institutions are supposed to operate as independent institutions is completely under threat and could cost us many things the years to come.
I listened to Right Honorable Raila Odinga the other day, and he was castigating the Speaker of the National Assembly, Moses Wetangula, and he was saying Wetangula should not have taken sides in this thing. He was literally calling for that guy to go.
Yeah.
Because he said, you, as a Speaker of the National Assembly, you're supposed to be completely impartial.
You know, Fred, that is the problem that now I currently have with the former Prime Minister, because he is presumed to be a leader of an opposition party. And not just a party, but a party that has built on political freedoms and human rights. It's a party that has largely crafted itself as an institution that champions issues of democracy and fairness. And so looking at what we've gone through in as far as the conduct of the institution, leave alone the personality of Deputy Gachagua, it should bother you, and they shouldn't have been part of that process, because then it shows that institutions are becoming increasingly compromised. ODM has been a victim of such institutions that have conducted themselves in such a way, and the reaction has always turned out deadly because of the confrontation between the people and the police, and ODM has lost the highest number of supporters. Fred, there's no party in this country that has lost it, not even the Ford Kenya of the late 80s and the early 90s, because back then it used to be maybe some lawyers being manhandled, but a case where people are gunned down 50, 100, no other party has been able to lose, but people have lost lives because of the journey that ODM has taken. The last thing I would have expected, both as an institution that has over the years been seen as the one that has championed the issues of democracy and human rights, but also tactfully as politicians, because what they've just done, they've aided William Ruto's political problems, because Gachagua was supposed to be Ruto's personal problem. Now they've helped him to achieve his political goal at the expense of the credibility of the party, because then the members of ODM, those who are hardcore, might not be able to check this. I was just looking at
and if you look at the fact that now ODM is demanding a bigger piece of the cake for helping President Ruto to get rid of Gachagua, then you get to see the spirit of what they stand for. It's just interests.
It paints the party in a bad way, Fred. It shows that these are beneficiaries, they're greedy and they're beneficiaries of other people's problems. But even much more worse is, Fred, because ODM is a political party and is a party that is purporting to actually want to form the next government. How do you form the next government when you're joining already an extremely unpopular government? How do you campaign? How do you
what do you say?
What do you say when you go to the people when already you're in cabinet by half?
Yes.
You understand? Because they're saying they're going to fill some more cabinet positions. So ODM is almost going to get 10 cabinet positions in that parliament. They're going to get PSs. How do you go back then to the people who are
and tell them this is not our gun?
How? You know, because the deputy party leader of the two deputy party leaders of the party are in government. The chairman of the party is in government. The leader of majority of the party is in government. How do we lead the campaign going forward, Fred? I was watching a very interesting clip now that the US is going into election next Tuesday, and one of the key campaigners of Donald Trump is a lady called Tulsi Gabbard, who was a congresswoman and a long-time member of the Democratic Party. And for her explaining as to why she joined the Trump and the Republican Party, said she didn't leave the Democratic Party. He said the Democratic Party left her. Meaning that the things that it stood for,
the party moved from the ideas.
It moved from the ideas and what the people stand for. And I think ODM has committed the similar crime, because ODM for many years has truly, Fred, is the reason why me have supported ODM many times against even my own people. You know, many times we would have even our own people running for presidency. But Fred, I kept on saying that I know this person is my homie, but I believe that if you can have a proper constitution and structures that can be able to benefit everybody. Fred, the people that when we went to the streets to be able to get the 2010 constitution, it didn't just guarantee the ODM supporters and their regions alone. All the 47 counties, including the areas that voted no for that constitution, are beneficiaries of that devolution. That is the kind of mindset that you want to develop as a nationalist. And ODM has for a long time been able to brand itself as that kind of a party. And so to come and be able to operate in the manner that they are, where you can see instances of outright injustice, you can even see instances of outright corruption where people are being bought to pass decisions. That is not something that you want to endorse as an institution. To even an extent, I had wished even ODM had probably supported the president from behind so that they do not have to join cabinet, join the state department. Because once you do that, then it becomes very easy to go back and sell ODM. I truly believe this is the end of ODM, and I think we wish them well as a party, but then the people and the supporters and what they think is what we are going to determine next in the next elections that are coming.
Now looking at the precedents themselves, now legal, constitutional precedents.
Yes.
One of the things that the judges said yesterday is that we cannot allow the position of the deputy president to be vacant. But if you look at the spirit of the constitution, the timelines that it gave, within which you can replace a deputy president, the process of replacing him, it foresees a situation where there could be a vacancy as we try and get somebody to fill that position. So now we've made it so easy to evict a deputy president.
Absolutely. For the process of impeaching the president and the deputy president and really other executive members of the executive members of government is extremely very clear. And so there's no doubt about what the process is. I think every average Kenyan knows it. And the grounds that a president or a deputy president can be impeached, those grounds are clearly provided for in our constitution. The debate we have is how that process has been partaken in practice. Because you can have a provision in theory as to how the process is supposed to go. But then the conduct of those who are executing that process and how the person that is facing that process is treated is also a factor, because they say in constitutional terms, Fred, that justice must not just be heard. It must be seen to being done. You understand? It must be seen that this person has gotten fair process. And clearly you've seen there's been an increasingly attempt to be able to defeat justice, to ensure that the victim does not get space to be able to exercise all his rights before he goes through this entire process. You see, that's why he went to court. But very unfortunately, the conduct of the court hasn't been quite very good, particularly this particular bench. Even the demeanor, Fred, I don't know if you've been watching the process. You can tell the demeanor of those judges is like they already said. You can tell them, and the courage to be able to sit and be able to answer the way they do.
And
on live television.
On live television, whereby even the lawyers say we feel as though.
And the Judicial Service Commission actually has a provision, Fred, as to whenever you feel like a case is either controversial to you or you might not be able to deliver fair hearing based on the kind of your position that you have, and it has been already clearly proven with the judges that we have all the three of them. Each of them has a direct link to this government. One has his wife actually appointed by the president, who is working with his wife, a wife that he sees every day. How do you go back and make a decision against a presidency who has hired your wife? That one doesn't even need but the judge has insisted that I'll sit and be able to hear this case. It's gross misconduct, because they actually express provision, because it's expected that as human beings we can make mistakes, and there's a point in time, Fred, as a judge, you might end up meeting a relative that is viewers or a personal friend, and it actually gives you reason to recuse yourself and say, for this reason,
my relative,
or a friend or somebody that I'm a close acquaintance, I cannot be able to make I do not believe I can give a decision that is fair, and you recuse yourself. But this is a problem that you're going to face, and I kept saying that, Fred, where we are now as a people, it is now only the people of the Kenya that can be able to save the country, because the institutions are increasingly failing in their mandate.
And the other thing is, you see the decision by the courts that the deputy chief justice can be able to set up a bench while the chief justice is not incapacitated.
Fred, that was what we call gross insubordination, because the mandate of the chief justice is very clear. Actually, the reason why they are firing this deputy is what this deputy CJ should also be fired for. you know, his gross misconduct.
Yes.
And it's amazing how she's kept her peace. Maybe she's saying, I know where I'll catch her.
Yeah, yes.
I know I'll catch her because unknown to many Kenyans, many Kenyans think that the case has collapsed.
Yes.
What they've forgotten is that the case is continuing, and actually the mention is on 7th, which is next week on Friday.
Yes.
The only thing is that among the applications they've said the process can continue in the interest of the country as we continue to listen to the case.
Yes.
So the case is going to go a whole way, and the Supreme Court, Fred, is the same Supreme Court that nullified a 30 billion shilling elections. You understand?
Yes.
So what?
So this is going to go the full haul.
It's going the full haul.
Yeah.
Most Kenyans think that you know, I think the president is really good with the optics, and I think sometimes his work mentally. Sometimes, Fred, they say the first defeat is delivered in the mind in any competition.
Yes.
So must be able to subdue your competition just by the look of things.
Yes.
So that we're able to do that. So that's what they're trying to do with the optics, with the first. The fast-tracked process of swearing in.
Yes.
But Kenyans do not know that actually the case is in court and is going to proceed, and the issues that this president has raised, including an appeal in court questioning this bench, which is yet to be decided on, and it can be decided on. And so what happens, particularly for those of us who are interested in the legal matters, Fred, is what happens if the Court of Appeal then decides that this bench was not well constituted.
It nullifies everything
that has been done by
but
this bench.
how do you now swear in a deputy president who's been sworn in?
That's why in legal terms we call jurisprudence. You know, that is how now we begin to come up with solutions as to how we're able to conduct that, because Kenya is a growing nation. And so it will be interesting because two things are happening, Fred. This case, the judges who are sitting this bench have actually proceeding with the case.
Yes.
So next week, I think on 7th, they say they are sitting to begin to hear the facts of the case and be able to listen to the people. That is going to take time, assuming the injunction that is being sought at the Court of Appeal on the validity of this bench does not go through. But if it fails at Court of Appeal, the injunction to be able to disbench this team, it still has, Gachagua still has a chance to go to the Supreme Court, which then has to decide on the validity of this bench before the case begins to start. We are going to be in courts for a long time. And so it's good for us, Fred, because so that at least Kenyans, for once and for all, we can be able to decide on how do we go about these things. Because in future, Fred, it might be a president. It might be a president who is a head of state that is facing such impeachment. And in such a case, we need to be able to fill in all these gaps. And even know, because sometimes courts, because they've been given mandate, Fred, to be able to interpret the law, so they might not be acting on express provisions of the law. They can only interpret what does the Constitution, did the Constitution expect. So we are in such a place, because some of these questions that we are raising, that what if this court passes this decision, has never been done before. It's the first time.
So we'll be setting new precedents.
Precedents in court, both in High Court, the Court of Appeal, and I think we need, that's why Rigathi Gachagua must go all the way to the Supreme Court. The kind of history that was made with the Raila Odinga of the presidential petition. You know, they were able to come up with some very, very important decisions that now are influencing how elections are done. Remember the case of Maina Kiai on the validity of the vote. That is was a landmark decision, Fred, because then it said that the vote at the ballot is final, and what is declared at that polling station is final, and that you cannot change even a comma without a high court. Even a comma, you can't change it without a high court decision. You see, those are provisions that are not expressly provided for in the Elections Act, but in practice they've been set as a precedent in court. So we are at a place then now where we are able to get also, in this case of the deputy president, to be able to know how do we go about these things in as far when they are challenged in the manner that they are being challenged. And I think Rigathi Gachagua might be seen as somebody that is losing his weight, is losing his fight. But what he's doing is for the better of the other people.
It helps us filling those blanks as we move into the future. We are filling blanks that will be able to take care of those who are coming after
including
us.
some 3 very important things in there. The issue of public participation. That would be a landmark decision that we are waiting to see, because I believe all these things will go to the Supreme Court. Fred, whatever happens here, the High Court and Supreme Court would be challenged and re-challenged many times, because government is also in those cases. Remember, government is one of the respondents in this case. That's why you had the AG applying for the removal of the conservative orders, because he's acting on behalf of government. And so this is likely to go to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court of Kenya, once again, has an opportunity to be able to to set some very, very important landmark decisions that might influence how this country is run in many years to come.
Now, Kithure Kindiki,
yes,
the president has gotten rid of Rigathi Gachagua, a guy who's perceived to be a very strong-headed, a very strong character, maybe not a pushover.
Yes.
Now we have Kithure Kindiki, very well educated professor. The thing is this, is he going to be a puppet, or what kind of deputy presidency are we looking at with the Kindiki
Fred, it goes
candidature?
without saying that now that the president doesn't seem to like abrasive and strong people, you can only want the opposite. And the opposite is what is probably seen in Kindiki'S, because his personality is not a new person. Many people know him. He's been a senator for 2 terms. And obviously he's a laid-back guy. I used to see him back in the days at a different station when we used to...
So it's a question of him being told jump, he asks how
Absolutely.
high.
And this
that's the kind of person the president is looking for.
Because those who worked with President William Ruto have said it very times, Fred, and we have mutual friends that will tell you that. That President William Ruto is the kind of leader that does not listen to a lot of the decisions that people say. He's what you call a hands-on manager.
Yes.
You know, the kind of president that calls into state departments. You heard him say, many times I've heard him say, even whenever it comes to do a launch of a government project, he says, you know, I talked to this department. I was speaking to the governor of CBK and I was telling him, how can you know, when you have such a hands-on president, it becomes sometimes very hard to make personal decision even as a manager. That's why you have cases where there is no single minister. A lot of these ministers, and I think former cabinet secretary Moses Kithure alluded to this, that sometimes they'll just hear, because there are certain positions which the president can appoint, and there are those on which the cabinet minister is supposed to appoint. Most times, for example, the directors or board of directors and CEOs, you know, a minister has an upper hand. But sometimes they'll just hear a gazette notice that so has been appointed the chairman of this particular board, you know, and you have just to comply because they have a very hands-on president. And I doubt if you're that hands-on, like this particular president, you would be able to want somebody that can be able to question you. And Rigathi Gachagua has not hidden that. He said it in that press conference at the hospital. He said the reason why he's being pushed out is because he's able to tell the president the truth on the table.
And he claimed that he was the only person within that cabinet who was capable of challenging the president.
Absolutely, and it explains why he's being pushed out of office. So who would want again to bring in somebody who can challenge him? That's not what this president probably wants. And so Kithure becomes a very important, pretty much a better replacement for that position. And Fred, there's something else just quickly I'd want to touch on, is that then now you ask yourself, what next? Because this president, being that he's a politician, then he has to look forward to the next campaigns. Fred, anybody else that wants, I keep repeating this, anybody else that wants to run for presidency or run a national campaign must be ready by this December. That means the president then has to have his sights on what happens in 2027, which has so many dynamics, because the president now came in with a particular base that he's completely lost half of it, and he has to create a new base. And the people that he's aligning to still are ambitious, which is, for example, ODM, have other plans. So in the candidates of in the candidature of his running mate in 2027, he needs somebody that can be able to campaign. And I don't think Kithure has that demeanor of somebody that
maybe as he starts running the current office as deputy president, we are going to see maybe a different side of Kithure Kindiki. Or you don't believe there's a different.
Which one?
You don't believe there's a different.
Which one are you looking forward to? Because we know the one that you're looking forward to. 3 things are going to be very important for 2027. Otherwise, Fred, I can confirm once again on this show, Kithure might not be the running mate of President William Ruto in the 2027 election, because of the enormous weight you need from your running mate to be able to win elections. Because, Fred, there is no one particular region that can win the presidency of this republic, not with the new constitution that we have. Even if the mountain was to vote, 4 million votes landslide, there's still 18 million other voters there. So you can never win such an election. You must be able to combine at least 2 or 3 other regions. And with that is how you're able to have a winning formula. So the person that this president gets in as his running mate, being that we are an optical country, we want to see who's on the ticket to know if we're in government or not, based on how we do our politics first. Then it means that running mate must be able, one, to be able to campaign, must be able, somebody that is able to mobilize more funds so that they're able to fund campaigns, but 3, and most importantly, must be somebody that can also become president in the future, so that he can be able to probably protect this president, because this president might face a lot of charges if he leaves.
At least he ticks the last one.
He ticks, the last one, he fairly likable guy.
Yeah, he's a likable guy.
Yeah.
Resources, unless he wins the Mount Kenya billionaires.
It's not going to work, because all billionaires have no business with this current government. Fred, it's the impeachment of Deputy President Kindiki'S has put some of the appointees of the president from the mountain, this particular government, in a very awkward place, because they're sitting in a government that is being perceived to be persecuting their people.
Yes.
And so I wonder how it would be like, for those of you who come from Murang'a,
yes,
you probably can explain what used to happen to the late Kamotho when he used to go back to my you go back home, nobody wants even to shake your hand. Yeah. And yet you're a full cabinet minister, you know.
And even your cabinet ministry, the influence is not felt.
Nobody really cares about it. Yeah, it's just like the way we used to have Raphael Tuji in cabinet, and you would go to Kisumu to listen to the response.
And when people kick him out of that place. In fact, it was very unfortunate, because I basically was somewhat close to people who knew Raphael Tuju.
Yes.
Raphael Tuju, when he was a cabinet secretary, decided he was going to take, you remember the mobile clinics?
Yes.
He took the mobile clinics to Rarieda.
Yes.
Lo and behold, even water pipes. Yeah. He took water pipes so that water can be gotten from the lake, yes, and pumped through a system to their homes. They destroyed the pipes.
I'm telling you.
They wanted nothing to do with him.
That is, Fred, the awkward position that I think is the awkward position that I think most of the appointees in this government who are coming from the mountain are going to face. If you just listen keenly to the responses of the people online, you know, nowadays we have something that we didn't have in the Kanu days.
Yes.
Our ability to get people's feedback in real time, to be able to know,
you know exactly what
to have an idea. You might not have the full view of what everybody is saying, but you can begin to have a feeling, you know, 10, 20, 30 people, and you look how many of them are saying this and this, and then you do profiling. Where are they coming from? It's easy to do that now with the data.
True.
And social media has completely availed that I do not need now to run a questionnaire. I can also just read your opinion, and also be able to tell whether or not you
get where I'm coming
Absolutely. From. And Fred, I really think the mountain is now a wounded animal. And it will be very interesting to see how this president is able to balance that as far as the deputy president is concerned, because Kithure then will have a very big responsibility. The kind of responsibility they're giving him is too big. How is he going to mobilize the people? How is he going to mobilize the resources? How does he make sure he lives up to the expectations of his president? Because going to an election, they have a duty to win an election, and the deputy president position is a very key factor in as far as mobilizing of votes is concerned.
Can he? Because one of the people they will be facing during that time, whether as a public office, whether as a presidential candidate or as a civilian who's campaigning for somebody, the person they will face is the deputy president.
Absolutely.
And mostly so in the mountain.
Yes.
Kindiki cannot be able to, unless Kindiki
transforms overnight.
Yeah, unless he transforms and becomes a completely different man, like Saul to Paul. I don't see from his past political demeanor, presence, and influence him being able to bring people into.
Maybe he needs to go back to the history books and see how they can.
Just a minute. I think Alice, our director on the other side, she's going to give us at least so that we are able to see. As you can see, guests have already started arriving at
KICC.
At the KICC. You can see that's Kithure Kindiki, I believe. That's the deputy president designate. You know, your life changes completely.
Absolutely.
As in the moment you're mentioned, announced that it's you, security move, you have wrecker squads going to even your mother's place.
Absolutely.
Your home in Geshagi, your mother's place, your sons, your children, all are placed under security.
Yeah.
Your wife becomes the second lady. And in the same way, life changed yesterday pretty fast for Rigathi Gachagua.
You're now moving into a government mansion with almost 300-400 employees.
Yes.
I think maybe just for the benefit of being a human being and being proud of him as a person,
yeah,
it's a momentous day for.
Oh yes, it is.
It's a momentous day for Kithure Kindiki. The journey that he has taken over the years, from a senator to a two-term senator to a cabinet secretary, and now becoming the deputy president of the Republic of Kenya is a turning point to his life.
True.
And this changes the fortunes of his family for good. You know, once he becomes deputy president, it means they will be taken care of by government for the rest of their lives.
That is if he's not impeached.
Yeah, and that is a question. That's a legal question that we have to look at. But hopefully, you know, Fred, for those of us who don't really care about this government, it's very hard to see which position should I take. But at a personal level, this is a big milestone in his career.
Yes, it is.
It's a big milestone in his career as a person, and he's been able to rise to that particular rank. Fred, in the next 100 years, God willing, if Kenya remains a democracy that it is, it means you can only have 10 presidents. It tells you how much the chances, how minimal the chances are that you can get to a position where Kithure is getting to get to. And I think for him is a big congratulations, even as we raise the many questions as to how we've gotten here. I think he's done well for himself, and we completely wish him the very best. You know, it's a master stroke that President William Ruto played in this, in the sense that if Rigathi had not yet gathered the critical mass, or maybe it's with us Kikuyus. Kikuyus don't demonstrate. Yes. I can assure, after Kithure Kindiki is, after Rigathi Gachagua, I mean, by the stroke of the pen by the judges yesterday, it was declared he couldn't hold that position anymore. Majority of these supporters back home went to their businesses to go and work. So you don't expect any action from that area. And Kithure Kindiki, coming again from more or less the same area, maybe checkmates, because you have other people who are saying, this guy is... He's a nice guy. Fred, you know, that is the reality of how you're saying the mountain conducts itself. Oh my word, yes. The mountain conducts itself politically. Yes. But Fred, it must be remembered that the Kenyan politics and the way mobilization is done, sometimes you need to be forceful. Yes. Otherwise, then the mountain will remain in opposition for the next 100 years. There's some level of force that is needed to be able to achieve these things. Fred, that's why even to get our independence, people had to go to the bush. It's a human thing, unfortunately, and you have to live with it. And so when you look at the kind of milestones that this country has made over the years, from independence to the second multi-party, the fight for the multi-party democracy, and then getting the new constitution and devolution, it has been a physical battle. It has not. If the choices was just that we sit in a hotel and decide on those things, Fred, we would have never been here. Yes. We would have never even have had this devolution. Because you see what devolution has done? It has decentralized powers that we have governors who are now operating as presidency. Yes. And the people you can't fire. Yes. The resources that opposition was struggling to mobilize back in the days to fight Kanu, today these governors can be able to compete. And if we didn't have devolution, this president would not have been able to challenge the former president. True. So those battles came because people went physical as well. Look at what we're having now, Fred, with the challenge that we have with the institutions. Yes. Fred, I'm telling you, if Kenyans do not come out and show open defiance to the kind of things that we're facing now, then this country is going to head into problems. So if the Kikuyu nation and the whole mountain as it is have to go back and replan themselves, based on how we do our politics, which is unfortunate, Fred, because I struggle with this issue of ethnicity. Being that I've operated mostly as a nationalist, I have never voted for anybody from my home, up until today, Fred. Yes. And so sometimes I kind of get lost in it, because maybe I've largely been raised as an urban person. So I largely, sometimes I forget that I am supposed to belong to some region. And even though everybody must come from somewhere, I come from somewhere. I know you cannot deny where you come from. Be proud of where you come from, but don't use your
dialect
to infringe.
to infringe on other people, to see yourself as greater than by simply the fact that you speak different. That's just ridiculous. It's as ridiculous as whites thinking they're superior to us.
Absolutely.
Because their skin is light. It's ridiculous.
It's crazy, Fred. And I think just to go back to your point on the mountain, this is that point when you're going back. It's time to go back to the drawing board. And clearly, when you listen to just sentiments, and I've taken time to listen to the opinions of the people, Fred, some people are not very happy with what is happening. And you can guarantee for sure they are going to rearrange themselves because the numbers there are real. The resources there are real, and the impact that might have maybe in the electoral process, as you say, they might not go on the streets, but Fred, you can't escape the vote. You can't escape. Unless they are able to pull an amazing move to convince. Fred, I read somewhere. I was checking online and I was reading some comments from somebody. And he was explaining the power of the vote and how helpless a candidate is at the time when the voter is just him and the paper to tick. Yes. You see, Fred, you can come and buy us with all kinds of money. Yes. But you see, at that point when I go in there, I'm all alone. There is no gun on my head to really vote for you. Yes. And if Kenyans or voters were able to appreciate how strong that is, many of these leaders would go home. Because at that point, there is no squads. Abduction squads to be able to come and try to you cannot abduct that many people at that point. And at that point you're helpless. And I think Kenyans and really that's why it's important for us and many of us who are interested in good governance to really focus on civic education. Because Fred, if we can be able to achieve that so that Kenyans can be able to understand the importance of elections and why we should go to vote and the opportunity cost of choosing a leader that benefits you as opposed to a leader that wants to benefit himself, that would be the turning point of our country, because then we would be able to have voters that can teach politicians lessons. Fred, the conduct of this National Assembly, the way this National Assembly has conducted itself deserves to go home by 100%. Oh yeah, they deserve by 100%. Many a times around 60-70% of members will go home. But this one for sure deserves to go home because they've completely failed Kenyans. And only Kenyans have an opportunity legally to be able to challenge them either through a national recall or through the elections when they come.
And as we will be moving to KICC later on, the mountain, when the election comes, is going to be one of the swing votes.
Absolutely.
It's going to determine who is going to be president. I believe probably one of the things that the president is praying for is that Raila Odinga's candidature goes through at the AUC. Because if Raila is on the ballot and the sentiments of the people of Kenya remain the way they are right now, this election will be won by Raila in the morning.
Early in the morning. And you know, that's why the president, and I think somebody from ODM was telling me that that's why they're pressuring this president to actually restructure government before February, because they want all their people confirmed in before that before that happens. Because Fred, regardless of what happens on February, I think it's February 20-something, the date when they're going to have the African Union election. If Raila Odinga wins the election, ODM is done with President William Ruto. If Raila Odinga loses the election, ODM is still done with President William Ruto. Either way, regardless of what happens, because there are so many people within the ODM, particularly, you know, Fred, there are those people who support you because you come where you come from, but the others support you because of what you believe in and what you do, what you're doing for them. That is a group that then does not owe you a lifetime support.
As long as, like the lady you've said, she says the Democrats left her.
Yeah, they left her. That's what they're saying, that the party is no longer what we're standing for. And when you look at Raila Odinga, Fred, you must remember, his community and where he comes from is not the backbone of ODM. The backbone of ODM has been the western and the coastal region.
That western and coastal region have been the backbone of ODM.
Because of the number of voters that come from those regions. The western region, Fred, unknown to many, has almost 3.5 million votes that voted in this election. Sometimes people just look at the numbers in the western counties, the 5 counties, which registered voters about 2.3 million, 2.4. But they forget there's what you call the diaspora vote. In Nairobi, the Western vote comes second to Kikuyu. You know, we have 700, 800,000 Kikuyus, and you have about 600,000 Luyas in this county.
Yes.
They are the largest opposition bloc in Nairobi. Majority of the ODM members of parliament being elected in this county is largely because of the Westerners. You understand?
Yes.
Otherwise, if you remove the Western bloc, there would be none of this Babu Owino, TJ Kajwang winning any election, because the Luo community is a minority community. It's number 5 there.
Yes.
They are not the major community. So Raila Odinga has
very vocal.
But you see, on the ballot, the voice doesn't matter, Fred. If you are 3, you just remain 3. However much you shout.
Yes.
That's why we've not won elections. We would have won this election a long time ago.
Yes.
If shouting was the basis.
Yes.
And so Fred, then he puts, my point was that Raila Odinga then has been a beneficiary, Fred, of open-minded voters from other regions who supported their cause. Otherwise, if it were to remain regions, he would never go beyond 4 governors. Remember, Raila Odinga has only 4 governors and 4 senators. What kind of power can you exercise with that? 4 governors, 4 senators, and 1 million votes, or 1.5 million votes. You can't be able to do that, because you just get maybe a million votes from the Nyanza, the turnout, because you have maybe 2 million votes from the Luo Nyanza, but turnout is about 60%, 7%. So it's about 1.2 million votes.
Yes.
And then maybe the diaspora votes, Nairobi here, they have about 200,000, 250,000 votes. So even if you assemble it, with the others, just another 500,000. So him as a person, he only has 2 million votes out of the 6.9. Meaning 4 million other people were never his people. There are people who just voted for him because of a certain reason. And
they can change at any time and decide to vote whichever way they want.
Exactly. And that has happened. That's why Western flipped, Fred.
Yes.
That's why you saw in Western. I think it's a good example. This is an area that was traditionally an ODM stronghold.
Very
but
true.
they gave President William Ruto 611,000 votes.
And actually pushed him
to become presidency. I guess now you're getting my point. These are people who are not very beholden. They are also standby. They are might not be as happy as to how the party has conducted itself. So even though there are those ones who will celebrate the positions that they're getting, that this is going to be a cabinet minister, the PS, what about those who are supporting ODM because of other reasons and completely disagree with this president? And yet
and you also have very senior people within ODM who don't support what their party leaders do. Yes.
Does not agree.
Yes.
With the actions and the conduct of the party leader of ODM. He's just unable to do it because of the politics of the day.
Yes.
But I can tell you, Fred, from the bottom of my heart, I've listened to him offline.
Yes.
He does not agree with what you are saying.
and
the last
Babu
and Babu Owino continuously has shown it. They do not agree. And many of them are saying, let us just vumilia until Baba gets the position. So as I told you,
once Baba gets the position,
or even loses it, the better. Then they continue with their course, because the ODM party has said it is competing in the next election, and that they will produce a presidential candidate. You understand? So either way, that's why I keep saying, I don't know how this president has done his mathematics. It's a very complex one. And if at all this president is hoping to win elections in any other way apart from after the votes,
all his action prove contrary.
Contrary to I don't think he desires to win this election by a vote, because the political mistakes he's made, because are completely, you know, they say a bird in hand, Fred, is worth much more than what you have in the forest. It was much easier for him to tolerate Gachagua, retain the 2-3 million, or even just half of the votes in Mountain, and then try to cut as Luo Nyanza a little bit. He was already gaining it even without impeaching Gachagua, because he had been friendly to the region, and people in that region were beginning to agree that Raila Odinga is becoming old, and we might have to move on, and they're open-minded to him.
For the very first time.
For the very first time, they're very open-minded to him. The president, this is the only president, Fred, that has gone to Luo Nyanza more than 10 times in the history of Kenya. President Kenyatta left the 1969, never went back until he died. President Moi struggled many times, only went there during public celebrations once in a while. Now, President Kibaki, we know the story. And sent to Uhuru Kenyatta until the handshake is when he became a frequenter there. But there is no other president who has competed with Luo Nyanza on the presidential ballot that has enjoyed the kind of support that is increasingly getting that particular region. But you see, a bird in hand, like we say, is much worse. So now this president has released the bird in hand and is hoping that he's going to get a few.
There's a flock of pelicans that is going to
come. In the forest, they're able to get it. It's going to be an enormous challenge, and I think as observers, we'll be very keen to see what happens after today.
All right. Well, with that, we got to bring the curtains down. We'll take you to KICC when the function starts, so that you can clearly see what is happening there as we take a break right now.